They called it the joke, a ridiculous nickname for a machine meant to fly, fight, and possibly die. But that's what the ground crews whispered the first time they saw it on the tarmac, a crooked-nosed, unevenly painted, patchwork aircraft that looked like it had been assembled from whatever scraps the mechanics could find during a desperate week. Some planes were sleek, some were majestic, some were terrifying. This one looked embarrassed to exist. Its fuselage had been pulled from a damaged reconnaissance plane. Its wings were borrowed from a discontinued trainer model. The landing gear had come from a storage warehouse where rust slept, quietly on forgotten metal. And the cockpit canopy, fogged on one side, had been salvaged from an aircraft. No one had flown in years. When the engineers rolled it out in the dim morning light, even they suppressed grins. Pilots cracked jokes before breakfast. Mechanics placed bets on whether it would collapse under its own weight. But in war, mockery means nothing. What matters is what a machine does when the sky turns violent. The joke wasn't built to fight. Its original blueprints were meant for slow observational flights, not the split-second fury of aerial combat. Yet the front line was chewing through aircraft, faster than factories could replace them. The command didn't ask what was ideal. They asked what was available. And what was available was this odd bird with a mismatched skin and a confused identity. Still, something about the airframe intrigued the lead engineer. It was light, dangerously light, but that also meant it could maneuver sharply. So he made a decision that changed everything. If the joke couldn't outrun enemies, maybe it could outdance them. They strapped on 2 light machine guns and, in an improvised stroke of madness, fitted a pair of rapid-fire cannons originally meant for ground-based mounts. They bolted them into place with reinforced brackets and tested the recoil by firing into sandbags behind the hangar. The cannons shook the entire plane like an angry animal, but they held. Barely. The crew shrugged. Good enough. The joke's first mission couldn't have been simpler. A routine reconnaissance flight over a contested valley. A young pilot, barely 20, received the assignment. It was supposed to be calm, uneventful. Take photos, come home, have lunch. That kind of job. But the sky tends to ignore human optimism. At 9,000 feet, where winds whisper and clouds drift like slow ghosts, trouble materialized. Enemy scouts first, dark flickers dancing behind the sun. Then 2 fighters sliced through the cloud cover, proving that danger needs no invitation. They dove with practiced precision, guns ready to tear the joke apart. The young pilot felt panic press against his ribs. He wasn't sitting inside a proper fighter. He didn't have the armor. He didn't have the speed. He didn't even have the altitude advantage. But he had instinct. The joke turned sharply, sharper than any of the pilots expected it could. The airframe groaned, but it obeyed. A burst of bullets zipped past the canopy. The second pass came fast, too fast to think, too fast to breathe. The pilot squeezed the triggers, sending both cannons roaring. The recoil nearly tore the stick from his hands. Then, impact. The lead enemy fighter jerked violently. A plume of smoke erupted from its tail. Down it went, spiraling into the clouds beneath like a silver leaf caught in a storm. The second fighter, stunned by the unexpected firepower, veered off and retreated. The joke's first kill. Back on the ground, the pilot stepped out of the cockpit, trembling, his face pale but lit with a strange smile. The crew stared in disbelief. Their ugly, fragile, cobbled-together plane had just survived a dogfight against trained enemy pilots. That night, the story spread like wildfire across the base. Pilots retold it with exaggerated gestures, and mechanics argued over who deserved credit, the kid who pulled the trigger or the engineers who made the impossible work. Everyone laughed. Everyone called it luck. But luck rarely repeats itself. The second mission came just days later. Bomber escorts were needed over a narrow sea strait, a dangerous corridor often stalked by enemy fighters. Dedicated interceptors were unavailable, so the joke went up alone with the bombers, flying at the rear like a stray dog guarding a flock of heavy metal giants. Halfway across the strait, the attack came. Swooping fighters, fast, sharp, disciplined. The bombers braced. The joke dove into the mess. What happened next became the stuff of legend. The joke weaved through the chaos like a creature possessed. Heavier fighters overshot their targets because they couldn't turn as tightly as this odd, patched bird. In the cramped airspace, speed became a liability. Agility ruled. The joke popped in and out of the smoke trails, firing controlled bursts that snapped at enemy wings and engines. One fighter fell, then another. A third almost collided mid-turn trying to shake the joke off its tail. By sunset, when the bombers limped home with holes punched through their wings, 3 enemy fighters were confirmed downed by the joke. Not a single bomber was lost. The squadron had a new superstition. If the joke flies with you, you make it home. But superstition alone can't explain a 19-to-1 kill ratio. There were reasons, hidden inside the strange anatomy of the plane, inside the unpredictable rhythm of its flight path, and inside the minds of the people who flew it. The joke's light frame made it unpredictable in a dogfight. Enemy pilots miscalculated its inertia. They overshot turns. They assumed it couldn't pull certain maneuvers. They assumed wrong. The pilots who flew it learned a special craft, flying low against ridges, using valleys to mask their approach, diving into cloud banks like stage curtains. The joke wasn't powerful. It wasn't fast, but it was patient and cunning, and its tiny silhouette often vanished in sunlight or haze. Most of all, its crew treated it less like a machine and more like a living ally. Every dent was polished, every seam tightened, every mission ended with hands covered in grease, replacing what needed replacing, strengthening what had cracked, repairing what had bent. And bent things were common. The joke returned from missions with bullet holes, chipped propeller blades, torn flaps, and once, even a cannon bracket hanging by a single bolt. But every time it came home, and every time the ground crew made it ready to fly again. It became a cycle. Fly, survive, repair, fly again. And with each flight, the joke grew wiser. Or maybe the people inside it grew wiser. Perhaps both. But the war was widening. The enemies were sending faster aircraft, stronger formations, better pilots. And soon the joke would be pushed to limits it was never meant to endure. Its legend wasn't built in a single battle. It was forged through dozens, each one stranger, louder and more dangerous than the last. As the joke's kill count slowly climbed toward its astonishing 19-to-1 ratio, something else was rising too. Whispers, rumors, disbelief. People wondered, is this thing really that good? Or are we simply afraid to admit how desperate we've become? The truth, real, raw, and exhilarating, lay in what happened next. You could trace the joke's evolution by studying the dents in its skin. Every new scar was a lesson. Every patched panel was a reminder. And every rivet driven into its uneven frame whispered the same truth. This aircraft was surviving things it had no right to survive. By the midpoint of the campaign, the joke had already earned a reputation across multiple airfields. Some pilots treated it like a symbol of hope. Others treated it like a symbol of madness. After all, what sane person looked at a rough, crooked reconnaissance plane, underpowered, under-armored, and believed it belonged in the sky with predators? The answer was simple: the kind of people war shapes. Those who flew the joke weren't the elite. They weren't the Academy's top graduates. They were misfits, pilots who had learned to improvise, adapt, and use whatever scraps fate handed them. If the joke was a patchwork machine, then they were patchwork warriors. One of them was Lieutenant Reeves. He wasn't fearless, just good at pretending. He had an instinct for danger, the kind you can't teach in manuals. Reeves didn't love the joke, but he understood it. He once said, "Flying this plane feels like wrestling with a stubborn mule that occasionally becomes a stallion," and he meant it. Reeves took the joke deep into weather most pilots avoided. He used storms the way others used altitude, shielding himself behind dark clouds, slipping through curtains of rain where engine noise was muffled. The joke's light frame shook violently in those conditions, but Reeves trusted it. Trusted the creaks and rattles. Trusted that if he asked the plane for something impossible, there was a chance, just a chance, it might give it to him. His trust paid off one night during a moonless patrol. Horizons vanished into blackness, the sea below an invisible void. Reeves navigated by feel, by faint instrument glows, by the subtle tilt of the horizon line known only to experienced pilots. Then he saw them. 3 enemy bombers flying low, hoping to slip across the border unnoticed. Alone and outnumbered, Reeves had every reason to back off. But the joke wasn't built for retreat. Its small size allowed it to approach unnoticed, riding in the bomber's blind spots. Reeves positioned himself beneath the lead bomber, so close he could hear the creaking metal above him. He waited for the exact moment the moon broke through the clouds. Just a sliver of silver light. He pulled the trigger. The cannons roared upward, tearing through the bomber's underbelly. Flames blossomed instantly. The aircraft lurched and dropped. Reeves banked sharply as the burning wreck fell past him. The other bombers scattered. He claimed one more during the chase, firing a precise burst that took out the right engine. The remaining bomber escaped into the darkness. The joke limped home with engine smoke trailing behind, one landing gear refusing to fully extend. Reeves scraped the plane into a rough, skidding stop. Mechanics ran to the scene expecting a corpse. Instead, they found Reeves leaning back in his seat, eyes wide, laughing like someone who had just won a bet with death. That mission brought the joke's confirmed victories to 8. And yet, the plane's legend was still forming. Higher command didn't trust rumors. They wanted proof. They wanted clean, typed reports and photographs, not wild stories about a patched-together aircraft embarrassing enemy fighters. So when the Joke's squadron was reassigned to a larger brigade, the skepticism was immediate. The new commanding officer, Colonel Burns, had a reputation for discipline and disdain for anything he didn't personally approve of. His first comment upon seeing the Joke was, "Why is this flying tool shed cluttering my runway?" The pilots offered explanations. The mechanics offered data. The engineers offered their uneasily confident smiles. Burns waved all of them away. He demanded the Joke be grounded until inspected. And inspected he did, meticulously, methodically, harshly. He walked around it twice, tracing his glove over every uneven line, every incompatible part. When he opened the engine cowling, he froze in disbelief. Inside, someone had reinforced the engine. Mounts using brackets. From a field artillery piece. "What kind of madness is this?" he muttered. The lead mechanic, a man named Lowell, simply replied, "The kind that keeps it alive." But paper and metal wouldn't convince the colonel. Performance would, so he issued a challenge. If the Joke was truly as capable as its record suggested, it would join an upcoming defensive mission as escort, under observation. If it failed, he would have it dismantled. The crew accepted. They had no pride left to protect, only a plane they believed in more than they admitted. The mission was a response to an intercepted transmission. Enemy fighters were planning a dawn strike on a supply convoy. The attack route was predictable, the timing precise. Escort fighters were already in the air warming their engines. The Joke was placed in the back of the formation, almost as an afterthought. Colonel Burns watched from the tower. The sky was calm that morning. Thin orange light stretched across the horizon. The convoy crawled along a winding mountain path beneath them. Everything seemed too quiet. Then, like shadows peeling away from the sun, 6 enemy fighters dove from above. The escorting fighters reacted immediately, but the ambush had been perfectly executed. 2 escorts were disabled in the first 30 seconds. The rest scrambled to regroup. The Joke, lagging behind, had the perfect view of the chaos. Reeves didn't hesitate. He dove toward the convoy, putting himself between the fighters and the unarmed trucks below. The Joke screamed downward faster than it had ever descended. The enemy pilots ignored it at first. It looked like a harmless oddity, not a threat. Their mistake. Reeves pulled into a climbing turn, cutting diagonally across the path of the lowest enemy fighter. The maneuver was reckless. No frontline aircraft would dare such an angle. But the Joke, with its light frame and absurd agility, completed the arc like a falcon pivoting mid-air. The cannons spoke. Short, brutal bursts. The first enemy fighter exploded in an orange fireball. The others noticed now. 2 broke away from the main attack and targeted the Joke. Reeves dove into the canyon. They followed. No sane pilot flew into that canyon at attack speed. The walls were tight, the turns unpredictable. But Reeves trusted the Joke like a sailor trusts a storm-season boat. He skimmed the canyon wall, pulling turns that would rip a heavier plane apart. The chasing fighters overshot again and again. Then Reeves caught one of them climbing too steeply. He fired. The fighter's wing tore apart. It spiraled into the canyon floor. The last fighter charged him head-on, an act of desperation. Reeves didn't blink. He dipped under the enemy at the last possible second and fired upward. A line of fire stitched across the enemy fuselage. It crashed into the ridge. When the Joke emerged from the canyon trailing smoke and engine oil, the convoy was untouched. The remaining escort fighters had regained formation. The enemy formation lay shattered. The colonel watched it all, not from radar reports, not from summaries, but from the sky itself. Tiny dots weaving, diving, exploding, and one strange, battered aircraft surviving impossible odds. When Reeves landed, the colonel approached him silently. He placed one hand on the crooked fuselage. "I was wrong," he said. "This aircraft is no joke at all." From that moment on, the Joke wasn't viewed as a mistake or an embarrassment. It became an asset, a secret advantage, a symbol. That engagement brought the Joke's count to 13 victories. And greater challenges were still approaching. Faster enemies, deadlier ambushes, and the battle that would etch the Joke permanently into wartime legend. The Battle of Blue Ridge Pass. A fight where the Joke faced its greatest trial and secured its most unbelievable numbers. By the time winter crept over the front lines like a slow gray tide, the Joke had become something more than a machine. Pilots whispered its stories around dim mess hall tables. Mechanics polished its patched metal with the tenderness of people caring for a wounded friend. Even commanders, once skeptical, began requesting the Joke for missions that demanded finesse, guts, and a little madness. But legends don't last on reputation alone. They are tested, brutally, suddenly, and without mercy. For the Joke, That test arrived at a place called Blue Ridge Pass, a narrow corridor carved through the mountains. Blue Ridge was a frozen labyrinth of cliffs, ravines, and swirling winds. Whoever controlled the pass controlled the convoy routes beneath it, routes that fed entire battalions. So when intelligence reported that a formation of enemy fighters planned to strike, a dozen bombers crossing the pass at dawn, panic rippled through command. The escort squadron assigned to protect the bombers was already short-staffed. 2 fighters had cracked engine blocks. 1 pilot was grounded with frostbite. Another had simply disappeared after a storm landing gone wrong. The commanders needed every asset available, even assets that once made them laugh. The joke was assigned to the mission. Lieutenant Reeves hadn't slept much the night before. He sat near the heater in the hangar, hands wrapped around a tin cup of bitter coffee, studying the worn edges of the joke's wings as mechanics tightened bolts and replaced cracked cables. The aircraft looked tired. Not broken, just tired, like an old soldier pushing through one more campaign. Lowell, the head mechanic, patted the fuselage. "She'll hold," he said, as if reassuring himself as much as Reeves. Reeves nodded, though he knew the truth. The joke didn't hold because of durability. It held because of will, his, the crew's, and the strange spirit that seemed to reside in the crooked machine. The morning sky above Blue Ridge was a deep, icy blue, the kind of cold that bites through gloves and sinks into bone. The bombers rose like slow giants, lumbering silhouettes against the horizon. The escort fighters circled them in a protective ring, engines growling. The joke climbed steadily, its engine coughing once, then settling into a determined hum. Ahead lay the pass, a jagged scar in the mountains. Snow clung to the cliffs like frost on broken glass. Winds twisted unpredictably between the ridges, catching wings with invisible claws. For most pilots, the pass was a nightmare. For the joke, it was familiar terrain. Light frames didn't fear tight spaces. They thrived in them. The formation entered the pass at 0700 hours. At 0709, the attack came. They descended from the high sun, 8 enemy fighters, sharp and fast, cutting through the air like silver knives. The warning call crackled over radios, followed by the roar of engines and the thunder of gunfire. The sky erupted. Bombers broke formation, scattering as bullets slashed across their wings. Escort fighters rose to meet the attackers but were instantly overwhelmed. One escort exploded in a flash of fire. Another spiraled downward, trailing smoke. In the middle of the chaos, the joke dove. Reeves didn't wait for orders. He had flown enough battles to know that hesitation kills. He dropped altitude, using the cliff walls as cover. The joke traced the contours of the mountain like a bird hugging the wind. An enemy fighter locked onto a bomber's tail. Reeves surged upward from below, catching the fighter at a blind angle. A short burst from the cannons ripped into the enemy's fuselage. Flames burst from its underside. It dropped away, crashing against the snowy slope. Kill 14. But the battle had barely begun. Enemy fighters swarmed like hornets, diving in coordinated waves. Their leader, a pilot known for his precision and ruthlessness, cut through the sky with the confidence of someone who had never been beaten. His aircraft carried fresh paint, unscarred and pristine, an unmistakable contrast to the joke's battered skin. He spotted Reeves. He peeled off from the formations and went straight for the joke. What followed was the kind of dogfight pilots talk about for decades. Reeves and the enemy ace spiraled through the canyon, engines screaming. Snow blasted from the cliffs as the two planes weaved through dangerously tight spaces. The ace had the speed. The joke had the agility. The canyon became a cage, and both pilots danced on the edge of death. The ace flicked into a snap turn, almost clipping the canyon wall. He fired. Bullets tore through the joke's left wing, shredding fabric and slicing through support ribs. Reeves felt the plane shudder violently. Most pilots would have tried to escape. Reeves chose the opposite. He dove deeper into the canyon, forcing the ace to follow. The canyon narrowed, walls closing in like jaws. The ace hesitated, just a fraction of a second. Reeves seized the moment. He pulled the joke into a sudden vertical climb, so sharp it felt like the plane might fold in half. The joke groaned, bolts straining, but it obeyed. The ace overshot beneath him, caught in the wrong trajectory. Reeves rolled inverted and fired. The burst struck the enemy engine. The fighter erupted into a trail of sparks before slamming into a cliffside. Kill 15. But the victory came with a cost. The joke's left wing was damaged. Control felt heavier. The aircraft leaned, stubbornly pulling left. Reeves whispered to the cockpit, "Not now. Hold it together." The joke responded with a trembling hum. Above them, bombers struggled to regroup. 3 were already damaged. 1 trailed fire. Escort fighters had scattered, each locked in a frantic duel. Enemy fighters regrouped for a second coordinated strike. 5 remaining, diving toward the crippled bomber line. Reeves climbed. The Joke's engine coughed, struggling. The damaged wing tugged the aircraft sideways. Reeves fought the controls, his muscles burning. But the bombers needed him. He rose between the bombers and the incoming fighters, placing himself on a collision course. The enemy pilots saw him and broke formation to engage. What followed was a chaotic, frantic ballet. Reeves dodged between bombers, letting the massive aircraft shield him from bullets. He fired only when gaps opened, clean, precise shots. One enemy fighter lost a wingtip and crashed into the mountain. Kill 16. Another came from behind, firing relentlessly. Bullets peppered the Joke's tail. Reeves dropped into a skidding dive, pulled up sharply, and caught the attacker in a cross-turn. A burst of cannon fire clipped the enemy's rear fuselage. Smoke poured out. The fighter spiraled down. Kill 17. But 2 remained, and they were closing. Reeves felt exhaustion creeping in. His hands stiffened from the cold. The Joke vibrated violently, a sign the engine was near its limits. But he pushed forward. One fighter chased a bomber. Reeves pursued, barely keeping pace. He fired a long burst, too long, but desperation guided him. The rounds struck the enemy's tail. The fighter spun out. Kill 18. The final enemy pilot realized the Joke was the threat, not the bombers. He turned and charged straight at Reeves. A head-on pass. Reeves met him, leveling the Joke's nose despite the damaged wing. The cliffs blurred beside him. The cannon triggers felt ice-cold beneath his thumbs. 2 aircraft, 1 sky, a single instant. They opened fire simultaneously. Bullets tore past the Joke's canopy, shattering glass. Fragments cut across Reeves's cheek. But the Joke's cannons hit first. The enemy fighter erupted into fire and smoke, breaking apart as it passed overhead. Kill 19. The Joke had done it. But the victory came with a terrible price. The engine sputtered. Smoke curled from the exhaust. The left wing dipped dangerously. Reeves fought to keep the plane steady. The skies were clearing now. The bombers flew on, battered but alive. Escort fighters limped back into formation. The battle was over. Now came the hardest part, getting home. The Joke drifted low over the mountains, losing altitude with every passing second. Reeves coaxed the engine, speaking softly to the machine like a weary friend urging another to stay awake. The runway appeared in the distance, a thin gray line in a sea of white snow. The landing gear extended halfway, then jammed. Reeves didn't have time for fear. He pulled the lever manually, kicked the panel, hit it with his fist. The gear extended just enough. The Joke touched down fast, skidding across the icy runway. The left gear buckled. The plane spun, sliding sideways until it finally screeched to a halt, kicking up snow and smoke. Silence. Then the cockpit popped open. Reeves climbed out, covered in grease, blood, and frost. He stumbled onto the snow, raising one trembling hand. Mechanics ran to him. Commanders gathered, stunned. Lowell knelt beside the torn fuselage, eyes filled with something that looked like pride and grief mixed together. The colonel whispered, "Welcome home, Joke." The Joke was examined for days. The damage was catastrophic. Cracks in the main spar, warped engine mounts, holes across both wings, 3 bolts missing from the cannon bracket. It should not have survived, but it had. The final tally was confirmed later. 19 confirmed kills, 1 loss, a 19-to-1 kill ratio. But the Joke never flew combat again. The damage was too severe, the risk too great. It became a training aircraft, then a museum piece. Visitors marveled at the crooked nose, the mismatched panels, the uneven canopy. Many laughed. Then they read its plaque. Then they stopped laughing. Because legends aren't born from perfection. They're born from resilience. The Joke was never meant to be a hero. It wasn't streamlined, powerful, or beautiful, but it was courageous. It was adaptable. And it carried the will of every person who touched it. A reminder that sometimes the strangest, most underestimated things become the very tools history depends on. And in the silent halls of the museum, under soft lights, the Joke sits proudly, not as a joke at all, but as a testament to what determination can create, even from scrap metal and desperate hope. If you enjoyed this documentary, make sure to like the video and subscribe for more incredible World War II stories. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. It really helps support the channel.